Time to tackle the second stanza. I think that's what they're called. Stanzas are to poetry as paragraphs are to prose, right? Surely some revelation is at hand. Hey, I was right about the apocalypse, Armageddon thing. Revelations is the last book of the Christian Bible, and it's all about Judgment Day. And at hand means that it's just around the corner, almost here. What's with the surely, though? Does Yeats mean that all the signs are pointing to the big finale? Surely means definitely, indisputably, unquestionably. It doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room. Surely the second coming is at hand. Aha! Here's the title. Definitely about Jesus coming back and triggering the end of days, not King Arthur. The surely repeated at the beginning of those two lines is anaphora again, and at hand, repeated at the ends of those two lines, is epistrophe. Here the second sentence ends. This one, 2 lines long, is so much shorter than the last one, 8 lines long. I wonder why. Is Yeats tying Revelation, which is not capitalized, with the second coming? Oftentimes, short sentences, compound sentences, and parallel structure evoke a powerful point or connection. Revelation, when it is not a book of the Bible, is an astonishing or enlightening discovery, according to dictionary.com. Is Yeats trying to get us to think about why the book of Revelations is called by the name Revelation? What is astonishing or enlightening about the end of the world? The second coming. Okay, so this has now come up 3 times. That's the very definition of refrain. And Yeats uses a rare exclamation point here. He really wants us to feel the same way he does about the pending day of reckoning. And how does he feel? He seems plaintive and sad when he says the falcon cannot hear the falconer, as well as scared when he says things fall apart the center cannot hold, and disappointed in the leaders he follows, the best lack all conviction, for not providing a good role model for him. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Which words? Oh, duh, the second coming. Who spoke out the words the second coming? Do we finally have a speaker for this poem? A vast image out of Spiritus Mundi. Vast means huge, but what the heck is Spiritus Mundi? That literally translates, thank you, Google Translator, to the spirit of the world. What does that mean? The spirit of the world is the entity through which all individual souls are connected to the great memory or universal subconscious in which the human race preserves its past memories. Think about it. If a spirit or ghost holds the memories of the dead person, the spirit of the world holds the memories of every dead person. Whoa. Why would the gigantic vision from the spirit of the world trouble my sight? Why wouldn't it calm or soothe my sight? What are the dead telling me? A vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight somewhere in the sands of the desert. All those S's sound really ominous. Sibilant, even. Like the snake. Ah. The speaker follows. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight with a colon, not a period. That means he's going to show me what the ghosts are showing him. The most common use of the colon is to inform the reader that what follows the colon proves, explains, or lists examples of what preceded it. Somewhere in the sands of the desert. The line, in the sands of the desert, makes me think of Moses leading his people through the desert out of Egypt in Exodus. Oh, and in Matthew and Luke from the New Testament, Jesus goes to the Judean desert to be apart from his disciples and face temptation by the devil. If I didn't know that, how would I find that out? I would just type in desert and Bible. But this is just an adverb phrase. Where's the subject and verb of the sentence? Somewhere in the sands of the desert. Ah, here it is. A shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs. What has a lion's body but the head of a man? In Greek mythology, the lion's body with the head of a woman is a sphinx. I know that from Harry Potter. And the sphinx asks riddles, and if the hero, can answer correctly, he lives. Maybe in Egyptian mythology, the head can be a man too. I'll look that up. Egypt has a desert, and sphinxes are treacherous, merciless, but also mysterious. Egyptians used them outside of tombs, so Yeats wants us to think about a treacherous, merciless, mysterious death. Well, that's bleak. A blank and pitiless gaze describes a giant statue because the eyes aren't really seeing and they're made of stone, which is not a very empathetic material. Statues don't feel a lot of pity. As the sun is a simile comparing the gaze of the statue to the gaze of the sun. The heat of the desert sun is pretty horrific. What's the shape doing? Moving its slow thighs. Of course, stone would be slow to move. Plus, sphinxes were carved like 3,500 years ago, so this one is probably pretty creaky about getting up and about. While all about it real shadows of the indignant desert birds. This is a dependent clause describing what's going on around the sphinx. Cool. About is a preposition suggesting around, more circle imagery. And real is another circle image. I think I was highlighting those in yellow. Reeling and about. The subject and verb are inverted, so the shadows are reeling. What is making the shadows? Desert birds. Hey, now we have the sands of the desert, a sphinx, the pitiless sun, and desert birds. Clearly, Yeats wants us to focus on the image of the desert. What kind of birds live in the desert? Oh, scavengers like vultures. They pick off of dead bodies that somebody else has killed. What else do deserts make me think of other than Moses escaping slavery, Jesus facing down the devil? Deserts are dry, barren places of desolation and no growth, no life, no hope. A post nuclear hellscape often appears like a desert, so this might be reinforcing the Armageddon concept. The darkness drops again. That sounds ominous. The repeated D sounds create alliteration, and the repeated S sounds make more sibilants. That just makes it sound like a snake hissing. Darkness and snakes are both associated with Satan. What's coming? Ooh, what's coming? But now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. For the first time, the speaker identifies as an I rather than my. What do I now know and what informed me? Let's see, I'll answer the second one first. The darkness dropping either tipped me off that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, or the darkness dropping cannot scare me because I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. What does 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle even mean? 20 times 100, 20 centuries is 2,000 years. Hmm. What happened roughly 2,000 years ago? That would be the year 12 CE. Oh, so maybe Yates was spitballing. Maybe it was closer to the year zero. Let's see. What happened? What happened? Oh, yeah. That was the whole BC to AD calendar changeover. BC? Who's he? Oh, yeah. Jesus was born. But then what's with the stony sleep? If Jesus is going to have a second coming, then he needs to not be here now. So arguably, Yates could say that he's sleeping. What makes Jesus' sleep not peaceful, but vexed to nightmare, meaning annoyed or irritated into a nightmare? A rocking cradle? Who's in the cradle? Is the cradle metonymy? Do we associate the cradle with the baby Jesus? But here the cradle is giving Jesus nightmares. Oh, and it's another passive verb. And what rough beast? Its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. Who or what is the rough beast? I feel as though I've heard people call the Antichrist the beast. Is that in Daniel or Revelations again? Its hour come round at last seems to refer back to lines 9 and 10. When the speaker says revelation, the second coming is at hand. Come round at last, before it was at hand. It's no longer imminent then, it's here. What a scary way to end this poem. But I still have one more line. What rough beast slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? Slouches is an odd verb to describe how the Antichrist would move. I suppose slouching seems lazy, indifferent, stooping, or even like more of an animal than a person. Bethlehem, I got this. That's where Jesus was born in a manger. Why would the beast, the Antichrist, go to the same place Christ went to be born? If Christ ushered in a new era for mankind, the Antichrist signals the end of mankind. I thought the second coming referred to Jesus coming back, but maybe it means that the second coming is the less good one. Either way, the world is wrapping up. The coming of the Antichrist and the re advent of Christ both indicate the end of the world. So, what the hey heck was going on in 1919 when the Irishman, William Butler Yeats, wrote this? His country was just coming out of World War I, which was called the war to end all wars. Warfare really changed from what it had been like in the past? Let's see, I'm going to go to Bing and type in World War I and new technology. Here it is. Before, people had to be physically near each other to kill each other. Now we have tanks and planes, machine guns, zeppelins, chlorine gas, torpedoes. How does that change the battle? Had some of the horror come out of, not the horror, some of the honor gone out of killing? More horror. If you had to look a man in the eye to kill him, did that make the killing cleaner somehow? Is it easier to kill people when you don't have to see their suffering? Oh no. History Channel always says World War I was the war when we began accidentally killing allies rather than enemies. And we started finding out back home through reporting that some of our boys were committing unspeakable acts in the midst of war. That made it tougher to tell the white hats from the black hats, the good from the evil. Probably it had never been that simple, and World War I just allowed us to discover that. Perhaps Yeats said that things fall apart, the center cannot hold, because our moral center was wobbling like a top on its last slow spins. Our moral compass was spiraling out of control, and our choices were waking up the beast. Our actions showed the Antichrist we were worthy of last judgment. We brought Satan forth with our sinful ways. The Battle of Armageddon is paralleled with the World War here to compare the end of social stability in the modern age to the end of times. If we no longer have our humanity, isn't that the beginning of the end? Maybe the sounds of battle are drowning out the commands of our falconer, and the new warfare is the anarchy loosed upon the world. In many battles fought along coastlines, the tides were actually blood dimmed. Could soldiers be considered the innocent going off to fight? Many of them were pretty young. The mode of the ages of troops was 21. The mean was a little older, but that's still pretty fresh faced. Was this the first war where fighters' innocence was drowned? Egypt was a part of the British Protectorate, one from the Ottoman Empire. The Middle Eastern theater didn't play a huge part in World War One, but some skirmishes occurred there, so Egypt is probably more symbolic than actual. And who are the best and the worst if we're looking at World War One? Could they be the political leaders who start wars but don't fight in them? The tribulation is supposed to come on the heels of a war, but it's meant to be a holy war for God's sake, not petty human squabbles over territory. The last two lines pretend to be a question, but Yeats knows the answer. And by the time he's done, we do too. The poem is pretty deep. I still don't think I get all of it, but I think that's the main points.